Let's read it very carefully. And he's talking about the 1920s. After World War I, the powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands, able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world, acting in concert by secret agreements arrived at in frequent private meetings and conferences. The apex of the system was to be the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations. Each central bank, in the hands of men like Montague Norman of the Bank of England, Benjamin Strong of the New York Federal Reserve, Charles Riss of the Bank of France, and Helmut Schacht of the Reichsbank, sought to dominate its government by its ability to control treasury loans, to manipulate foreign exchanges, to influence the level of economic activity in the country, and to influence cooperative politicians by subsequent economic rewards in the business world. Okay, so in today's world, it's the central banks acting in concert that dictate financial, economic, and political policy all around the world. All right, so how can we understand central banks? Well, the main function of central banks is to control the money supply. Okay, so money is just a concept, it's an idea, it's something that we just made up. And the way the central bank controls money is by controlling its scarcity, which creates the illusion that it's valuable. Okay, also you're forced to use money to buy things as well as pay taxes, take out loans. All right. And they control the interest rate, which is the cost of borrowing money. So another way of saying this is, one mechanism the central bank has to control the economy is by lowering or increasing interest rates. If it lowers interest rates, it's just easier, cheaper to borrow money, right? So you can go buy a house or buy a car. If they increase the interest rate, it's more expensive, so people spend less money. So through that mechanism, they're able to control the supply of money in the system. All right? All right, so how can we understand what central bankers are? Well, I'll give you three possible metaphors, okay? And I think these are all legitimate. Central bankers are the ultimate priests. They must control the flow of money to maintain the illusion that money is God. In this way, they are the new Catholic Church, okay? Remember, the Catholic Church in medieval Europe was the dominant power. It was beyond nations. It represented God on earth. Well, that's what central bankers are today. But also, you can think of central bankers as the game masters. They must control the flow of money to motivate people to play the game. As we discussed when we discussed the Americans, today we live not in a civilization, but in a game where we're all individual players trying to make as much money as possible. Now, central bankers are the ones who control the rules of this game. Last metaphor is central bankers are drug pushers. To expand their dominance, they offer easy money, and once a country is addicted or bankrupt, they hijack the financial system, which means to privatize or make independent the central bank, okay? So how do central bankers work? Well, let's do an experiment, okay? Let's use a thought experiment. Let's just say I'm a central bank, and I'm trying to get you to become addicted to my power, right? So what I do is this. I say to you, hey, here's $10,000. And you're like, okay, and what do you want for $10,000? I'm like, nothing. Just go enjoy yourself. So you take that $10,000 and you go on vacation to Hawaii, you live in a 5-star hotel, you're really happy. You come back and say, that was great. Can I get more money? And I'm like, here's $1 million. Go and enjoy yourself. And you're like, what do you want for it? And I'm like, nothing. Just go enjoy yourself. So you go, but this time you're smarter. You're like, no. This money is limited. I need to go and invest it if I want to generate more money, okay? Otherwise, I have to go back to the bank and get more money. So you start opening businesses, you invest in restaurants and ski resorts, who knows, okay? But you have all these investments. The problem is you really don't know what you're doing. And you make these bad investments. And eventually what you recognize is you're in debt now. You had $1 million, but now you owe $10 million. So you come back to the bank and you say, listen, I need $10 million. I'm like, fine, but now you have to give me your soul. And you're like, you're just stuck, okay? That's how central banks work. I know this sounds terrible, but that's really how they work in the world. All right? So now I'll give you examples. All right. So what central banks do is they have the power of God. They're alchemists, basically, because they can take paper, which we know is worthless, and turn it into gold, which is what everyone wants. Now, something to remember, and this is really important, is that throughout history, whenever there's a major power, there's always a rising power that challenges it. So in our world today, there's no nation state that can challenge the power of the central banks. But there are these technology companies that are arising that are trying to displace them from godhood, okay? So Bitcoin is something they've invented. It is the American military's fail-safe system in case the American government defaults on the debt and the US dollar loses its reserve currency status. So Bitcoin is being controlled by the American military along with certain technology companies, and they're trying to displace the USD. All right, so there's a conflict going on here. All right, also, artificial intelligence will be used to create the illusion of God, right? Why is there so much investment interest in artificial intelligence? Because even though it doesn't really work that well, it can trick people into believing it is God, that it is omniscient, that it is always right, that it's the ultimate authority. Last example is social media, video games, and porn are the drug of the 21st century, okay? So in other words, these technology companies, they're really in the process of creating a matrix in which we just live in a simulation and we're all slaves to the simulation, okay? So this is something that we have to think about, how the central banks are in power, but there's always powers that are arising and which will challenge the power of the central banks. Okay, so how do we get this system? Go back to the year 1960, the world's divided into two, right? It's divided between the capitalist West and the communist East. Now, this is ultimately a war of ideology. It's really a question of which system, capitalism or communism, it's better for humanity. Well, we don't know the answer to that question, but we do know the elite prefer capitalism because capitalism gives them more power, gives them more wealth. So the elites both in China and the Soviet Union, they basically give up, okay? In 1991, the Soviet Union basically unconditionally surrenders, and this creates the complete dominance of the American system, the Pax Americana. So once America has domination, it now can spread its system throughout the world. This is Karl Popper, and he wrote a book called The Open Society. And in it, he questions grand ideologies because he believes that it's these grand ideologies like communism and fascism that have destroyed the world and which have led to World War II. He hates Plato, he hates Marx, he hates Hegel. He thinks these are the three totalitarian philosophers in human history. And so what he proposes is that the height of civilization is the Anglo-American civilization. Okay? The Germans and the Russians are bad because they are racist, because they are nationalistic, because they are grand in their vision. They're always trying to transform humans to shapes and things that are anti-human. But the Americans and the British, they are practical. They are utilitarian. They believe in evolution, okay? And that's what Karl Popper believes the Anglo-American civilization is really the height of human civilization. But there's actually another way to understand the Pax Americana. And so the idea is, from World War II, we transferred the Pax Americana. And there are major differences, right? So World War II was about the nation state. That was the main constituent body of World War II. In the Pax Americana, what matters is the international rules-based order, which includes central banks, but also includes the United Nations, right? World War II was about mercantilism. Mercantilism is that you only trade within your sovereignty, okay? You only trade with your colonies. But Pax Americana argues for global free trade. Global free trade will lead to prosperity in the world. World War II argues for unity of will, and Pax Americana argues for consumerism. Okay? The unity of will is the idea that we must be a whole, that the constituent parts together are less than the whole. Okay? Consumerism is just individuals should just go and spend money and enjoy their life, and don't worry about big problems like the nation state, end of history, these ideas. All right. In other words, what's happened in our world is the world's gone from one that focused on civilization to a game. In a civilization, people are citizens who sacrifice themselves in order to obtain glory, okay? So think of Achilles, right? Achilles went to Troy because he was a competition among his other Greeks to seek eternal glory, okay? But in the game, we're all individual players who are trying to make as much money as possible.